Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Adam Green here with No More News. Thank you all for joining me today, Tuesday, July 29th, 2025. Got a huge show for you guys today. Uh-oh. Shoot. Uh, Yeah, I got interrupted by a power chat. I had to turn that off. Sorry, hold on. All right, interrupted by the power chat. I got to get that turned off. My apologies, guys. We'll get to those in just a second. With our epic return guest, he is the Nietzschean, Übermensching, Vril Maxing Irish storyteller, the epic Uberboyo back on the show today. Going to be discussing some Is Woke Dead with Sydney Sweeney, protests in Australia, Christianity in Ireland. We're just going to shoot the shit. Again, for the third time on the show, he's also had me on his show for a big 100,000 view stream with Gnostic Informant. That was cool. So good to have back on the show and speak with my boy, Mr. Uberboyo. What's up, dude?
How are you, sir? Well, like the one thing I have to say is that when you and Gnostic came on and you had that chat with me, because I was saying, but like I would check in with you and Gnostic every now and again and see what you are talking about, and like just the sophistication of both of your perspectives is just obviously like snowballed over the years. And at that point, I was like, wow, these guys are really hitting on something I haven't properly heard before. And I go in and you are talking about, so I actually really want to talk to you about Gnosticism and Christianity, because this is something I've got a lot of videos planned for YouTube soon that we can go into. And obviously, Neil was pushing very heavily on the idea that Platonism with the Maccabees in 170 BC was the sort of invention of all this. So those two things, I actually think it'd be pretty cool to get into today at some point. But of course, like I don't want to come in here and tell you how the shots are going to be shot. So, but yeah, it was a really good.
No, we're shooting the shit. You can take your shot. Like I said, I wanted us to chat it up in the beginning before we get to any of the material.
Okay, good.
So yeah, we can get into that, but I want to hear. I'm interested. Your YouTube channel, Uberboyo, you haven't been putting out a lot of content recently.
Yeah.
I follow you on Twitter. You're posting some bangers there on the regular. Not a lot, but what's going on with the YouTube channel?
You know, I kind of got a bit of fatigue, a little bit in a way. With you said, is the woke movement dead? You know, is it over? And there was this big tension where there was the right wing movement, if you so will, and with Trump and Elon and everything, it felt like that became triumphant. And at that point, I got a really weird feeling about a lot of stuff, and I like everything, all the censorship unleashed and all this. And I was kind of doing a lot of stuff in my life as it was, but I kind of was thinking there's something a bit off. And I actually think now an awful lot of what you call the right, like you've been proven fairly correct. I know you don't like him, but like Fuentes has been very high profile. This example of sort of saying the Trump movement's not all you think it is. It's like this is not a victory that we think that we're going to have, and you just got to be careful about all this.
He says he's been a plant from the start now, and he regrets ever supporting him. Like, so it's complete vindication on my biggest issue with Nick all along was him being anti-Zionist and exposing Zionists, but being a big Trump supporter. So now he agrees. Even Alex Jones is saying the anti-Israel people are vindicated. So do you feel like we won? Is that why you're
No, not so much. I just think that the things I talk about weren't fresh, because I had these instincts where I was like, all right, so what should I do? And I was kind of feeling like I turned into just a talk piece where I'm talking a load of crap and saying like kind of just talking about right wing things and kind of going down that rabbit hole. And there's a lot of problems in the right wing now, as you can obviously see. And it's like the movement's become dominant, but there's like I'm seeing a lot of people actually get a little bit depressed about how the slop that's coming out, the sort of like you would obviously say like it's turning into, you know, people are refusing to think now at this point, and it seems like an awful lot of the ideas coming out of it are dead. It was all fresh 5 years ago, but now it feels like very sterile and all this type of thing. So I went back to doing a lot of writing. I was actually busy doing other things as well. I just have like things going on in my life. And
what are you staying busy with, and what are you writing? You have a Substack, or are you doing a book?
So kind of like a book, but I'm going to do it is I'm just going to put out YouTube content at this point. We'll see how it goes. Maybe it's not that good, but I'll talk to you about some of it today, because it was me sort of saying, all right, I'm kind of just shilling Nietzsche and stuff like this. The kind of right wing thing that I grew up in, or that movement, is very much my sort of area, but I want to kind of take a step back and say, like, what am I actually? I don't want to just be a Nietzsche shill anymore. Like, I want to actually say my perspective on things properly, and that brought me back to an awful lot of my roots. I was used to talking about neuroscience an awful lot, things like this, and we'll get into it today. And pulling together like all these things, like religion, Christianity, neuroscience, even AI. I'm getting big into obviously AI and things like that. I really think that like AI film and stuff is only maybe a year away. I'm going to have actually an attempt to make an AI film. I'm currently scripting it right now. I'll run by the plot by you if you wish. And yeah, like a lot of that is taking a look at our situation, if you will, right now. So hopefully I don't sound too pretentious.
You're getting artistic in making AI art. And you mentioned neuroscience. I was watching you before this interview. You were on Break the Rules with Lev and Gnostic, and you were talking about, I guess it's like the group think. You're talking about how if all of your friends think somebody's based, like, but you don't, like, you almost think that they're based too. You're given that type of story. I thought that was cool. I was going to ask you about that actually.
I'd love to get into this because this is what I want to do this content on. I've made like 4 or 5 videos and I get through them and I'd be like, fuck, I'm not even saying this right. And I'd stop. And I finally hit the groove there in the last 2 months. And I've got like a couple prepared now at the moment. And it was me actually taking that Nietzsche question where we say to ourselves, Nietzsche is literally like morality is relative, which is a pretty extreme thing. Now, why is this? This is an abstract philosophical concept, but if you think about what the woke movement was a moral revolution. They're coming in and saying, sexuality should be liberated and free. It is evil to be closed-minded. It is evil if you are a racist, for example. And these things got enforced with the power of the law. These things got enforced with the force of the law. And right now in Ireland, for example, there's hate speech laws that are coming in. And this is what's weird about this, is that this is an objective statement. It's like racism is a canonical evil ontologically put into reality by, God or something like this. That's why we can put you in prison for it. In England, people have gone to prison for these specific crimes. And you really have to ask yourself, you're like, that's actually quite interesting. Is there a reality to this? And of course, the thesis from the right wing that we have is that no, there's no reality to this. They have a fake morality, and our morality is correct, which is to be based, which is to be, in-group preference. We should be pro our race and all this type of stuff. And me and you maybe debate and say like the true way to do that is to be a pagan, but it's this general thing where it goes into this beliefs. But the problem I actually went in was saying to myself, right, that I agree with that. But then you'd get people like Jordan Peterson and James Lindsay say woke right, for example. So they come in and categorize that right-wing perspective, if you will, that's self-interest and all this as being evil. So they're kind of doing this. So I was thinking to myself, right, how do you come up with a framework, a way of saying what is actually true here in the realm of morality, which I know sounds abstract, but there must be an answer to that, because otherwise it's just people saying their opinion over and back. Like, is there any gravity to this at all? And I, of course, said, well, where do you look for that? You look for psychology. This is a psychological question. There is no reality. You can't find morality outside in the we go look at the mountains or the trees or the sky. It's not there. It's in our heads. And of course, what's the way you study your head? You study it through brain science, neuroscience. That's the most hard way of looking at what goes on inside of our mind. Psychology is great, but it's very soft. It's very loose. So I was looking at the brain science of morality. That's what I started to look up. That I was like, what do people actually study this stuff? And turns out they fucking do. Turns out there's crazy studies on the brain science of morality. And this is what I was saying on Break the Rules. You have all these institutions in your head that you can manipulate inside of your brain that will change the way you perceive morality. Now, this is like very bizarre. So I can get you, Adam, and I can get a magnet. And this is called transcranial magnetism. And I can shoot it at the left side of your brain, and it will turn off your Broca's area, which is the part of your brain that generates speech. And you won't be able to talk for 3 hours, but you'll be able to listen because the other part of your brain that understands speech is still awake. So I'm able to manipulate your brain this very bizarre way. I can make you stop talking with these, like, zapping these magnets. So it turns out if you zap this part of your brain here called the posterior medial frontal cortex, complicated term, but think of it as just like this Sauron, this lighthouse that looks out into the world. If you zap this part of your brain, it affects your morality. Why? Because this part of your brain is the part of your brain that detects and assesses threats and dangers and your tribe, basically. And if you zap this part of your brain with transcranial magnets and suppress it, if you magnetize this and suppress it, it has this effect of making you more open to strangers. Basically, the moral valence of racism gets affected by brain science. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But weirdly, it also affects religious beliefs. So you become more atheist if you suppress this part of your brain. So this part of your brain, when it's turned off, makes you more atheist and makes you more anti-racist. So it reduces racism and reduces belief in God when you suppress it with magnets. Now, that when I came across that, I was like, that's fucking nuts. That's crazy, because that's an objective part of like, it's a scientific sort of foundation for pointing out what woke liberalism is, because everybody would say, what is a libtard? And it's somebody who's atheist and who makes racism the highest moral evil, this type of thing. And that's actually a reflection of something going on in our brains. Now, this leads me to something fascinating, because you say, oh, wow, that's interesting. What then is this, like, if you turn off this part of your brain, is this a bad thing? And it turns out, yes, this part of your brain is critical for evolution. It's part of the most advanced part of your brain, and it allows you to learn from problems because it assesses threats and errors and mistakes and tells you to fix them. When you suppress it, even though it makes you anti-racist and it makes you atheist, it makes you stop believing in God. It also makes you incapable of assessing problems because you've turned this part of your brain off. So you get the Nietzschean category of the liberal, which is, death is God, God is dead, nihilistic, atheistic, last man, can evolve, can adapt, and also like just open to the world, no standards, this type of thing. And I was like, wow, this is a big deal. But the more I looked into it, the more I started to realize that when you turn this part of your brain on, what do? You heighten racism, you become more suspicious of outsiders, you become more tribal, and you become more obsessed with God. All these things are connected in our head. And this is very relevant for me and you. I know maybe your audience is like, this is quite the rant, but you turn this part of your brain on and it turns on tribalism, ideological thinking, belief in God, belief in the race tribe. So basically, if you think about like Israel, like they say themselves, we're the chosen people and God is a Jewish God who chose us and we're his guys. That's like this part of the brain. It's the healthy perspective to take towards yourself. And this is like the argument you'd have against Christianity, maybe me and you would talk about, is that it's literally counter signaling that, saying that you're not the chosen people, Adam. You're not part of that. That's someone else. So they get to preserve this healthy way of thinking, which is quite interesting. But nonetheless, when you turn this part of your brain on, it generates that style of belief, which is we are the chosen people. We are as the Germans would say, we're the master race, and the Protestant God is Woden. That's what they believe. They morph their belief to turn it into a race belief. The Israelis would say we're the chosen people. Yahweh is our guide. The Irish would say, Dagda, and we have our thing. And we'd say our Catholic God is the right God, and the Protestants follow an evil God. You always do this when this part of your brain is turned on, and then you assess outsiders as strangers who are potentially threats. And this is crazy. This is like, wow, that is a framework of belief that makes sense. But there's one really awkward caveat. When you enhance this part of your brain, turn it on, switch it on to generate this in-group preference, tribe God, you could say race positive thing, which you might say is so based, it also turns up cognitive dissonance. This is a fucking big problem, because cognitive dissonance is the mechanism within your brain which allows you to lie to yourself and stay in a state of ignorance. It allows you to push the truth out of the way so that you can follow along with the tribe and take action and do what social consensus says. So awkward enough, that comes on the based right-wing side. And I found that and I was like, shit, this is not good. So now we have this diametric problem here, where you have the open-minded libtard seems to be correct. They are actually more capable of open-mindedness and suppressing their own self-interest to see things more objectively. It seems that's correct, but they're also married to this like death cult set of ideologies, which is anti-God, anti-life, anti-race, anti-everything. But then on the right side, you have this race-positive, God-positive, self-interest, evolutionarily advantaged way of living, but it's also connected to closed-mindedness and ignorance. Now, I've been looking at that the last while, thinking this is crazy. What does this even mean? So that's a big rant. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts? But maybe we can go into that.
Yeah, it's like describing culture on a psychological level. And it's interesting what you said about also in the brain when people are scared, they don't think logically. That's something you're talking about. If you can turn on this area in the brain, what do you mean when you say that? Like think about religion and tribe and then it activates, or you're saying like externally try to activate in the brain?
Actually, no, it doesn't seem very intellectual at all. This part of your brain, its role is to sit there like Sauron, and it has this giant eye, and it looks out, and it's actually so fascinating the way it works. Your ears and your eyes pick up information from the world, and that goes into things like your thalamus and stuff like this, which is what you could call a processing center. So your eyes see things, your ears see things, and that sense information goes into these other institutions like your amygdala, which is your fear center, and your thalamus, and then those ones report to this thing, this guy, which is the Sauron at the top. And so your amygdala, which is your fear center, you might walk outside and see a snake on the floor, and your amygdala will say up to the posterior medial frontal cortex, there's a fucking snake there. Or we'll say I'm Irish and I walk outside and I'm a Catholic and I see a Protestant, and my amygdala will be like, there's a fucking proddy outside, you know? And then my posterior medial frontal cortex will assess this. It's almost like a general, and he'll say, oh, that's a big threat. And then he'll send energy down he'll tell the amygdala to turn on and create lots of fear. So it's this thing where it's almost like the executive guy at the top. This is the guy who makes up religion and tribe sense and all this. So his job is to look out and watch what's going on and assess the threats. And when there's a threat, he hits he tells, your all other parts of your brain to do stuff. Your amygdala, it says, create fear. Make a plan. It tells your prefrontal cortex, take a look at this. So it's almost like this kind of coordinator, which is quite weird. And this is the thing that generates group identity, tribalism, these type of things, sense of even purpose and godliness, which is quite bizarre. So obviously it's fear would stimulate that. It's not necessary. And you think about like what is happening right now in the culture. So the Zoomers are demonstrating, specifically the younger Zoomers are having an extremely heavy right-wing shift. It's very hardcore. And on top of this, the Zoomers in the macro trends are also having a religious shift. Since 2021, there has been a break in a century-long trend. Since Nietzsche said God is dead, every generation that has come after that has been more atheist than the previous generation and has been more obviously libtard. And like the boomers were more atheist than their parents, the Gen Xers more so, and us millennials, we were the most atheist. We were the apex of atheism. We maxed atheism out. We also maxed out the woke movement. And the Zoomers in 2021 broke all that trends. And the death of God only happened 5 years ago. The peaking of disbelief in God, you'd think that's been there for like 50 years. You could argue maybe with like church attendance it has. But in England, for example, Christianity was still the majority belief position in the year 2000. In the year 2018 is when finally atheism became the majority state of belief of the people in the UK. So that death of God thing only happened like fucking 5-10 years ago, really recently, excuse my French, really recently. And then in the 2020s, post-COVID, all the Zoomers are now starting to do this very bizarre thing where they're heavily identifying with religious thinking. Now, a lot of people, a lot of Christians would be like, based.
Is it all the Zoomers, though? I think it's just like the echo chamber online seems like a lot of Zoomers. I don't think it's all the Zoomers are becoming religious.
So this is interesting. It's not left or right. It's actually beyond that. So the if you ask a Zoomer, broad scope, doesn't matter political denomination, they're significantly less likely now to say I'm an atheist. But they will, like, maybe you become a leftist girl, a Tumblr girl. Well, she should be a TikTok girl. And she'll say stuff like, yeah, I do manifesting and I pray and I believe in a higher power. So interesting, the way this belief is manifesting is not like we're going back to church. That is a part of it. There's a denomination, and it's a strong denomination of Christians. But this is more like, you can think of it like the Protestant Revolution extended to all ideologies. Paganism is rising. Various versions of paganism, Greek paganism, Hellenism, Wodanic paganism. You get girls who are leftists who take Wiccan Wodanic paganism and make their own version of it. You get Orthodox Christians, Catholic Christians, traditional Latin Mass Christians, Protestants. Like it's all seeming going this direction. So there's a movement away from, and this is interesting as well. The rise in this belief is not institutional. Church attendance doesn't seem to be going up. People aren't going to like temples and stuff. It's almost like an online phenomenon. Now you can definitely call that an echo chamber, but like Zoomers spend 6 to 8 hours a day online. You know, it's like that is the chamber. Like that's where they live. You know, and so this is an interesting phenomenon. Like what does this mean? I kind of got off track by saying that, but I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, you mentioned like the dichotomy of the woke left and then like the Christian right, or the awakening, the fear awakening of the part of the brain that increases religion and tribal beliefs. Did you see the South Park episode? Because that's what it talked about. It was like the woke is dead, and then now there's the Christian preacher and the push for Jesus.
Yeah,
you see it?
Yeah, yes. So, like I think I saw something. It was a Cartman. Was he in like a? Was Cartman in like a swimming pool resort or something like this? And he's complaining about
that's
minorities?
a different one. That's
okay.
That's all the multiculturalism that was at the water park song.
Oh yeah.
Which is
I saw that. I haven't seen the recent South Park then. No, yeah. I saw that.
So
one.
You're from Ireland. How was you came to America recently? How was your visit? And was it the first time?
Good. It was my first time. I was down in Texas. I was up in New York and all this. And it's a crazy place, man, because it is like the sort of hegemon of the world. It's Rome, you know, of the world. And I've never been. I've never seen it. I've never had context for what it was. So I liked it a lot, actually. Like it's weird because I've been psyoped by the internet to think that it's going to like fall apart any moment, and I could certainly tell parts of it are like that. Mm-hmm. But I was kind of going through it and looking around and saying to myself, yeah, like I understand it's degrading in many ways. Like New York's a crazy place, for example, but it's also got a very strong spirit. Like New York has a very strong spirit, for example. And I think when you're aware of what it is, that actually is like, you understand it an awful lot more. Yeah. Texas, I was seeing that. Like I was like in a few parts of the world, and I came up to America into Texas. And it was pretty cool. Like I have good reports about it, actually. And there's a lot of things about it that us Europores, you know, the Americans give us awful abuse for it. But it's kind of like I go into Texas, everywhere is air conditioning, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, listen, I've been in Portugal and stuff. It's really bad to get air conditioning. It's really hard to get air conditioning and stuff. So I'm kind of like, yeah, the Yanks have something going for them there. I get that.
Could you see yourself living in Texas or New York more?
Good question. Texas, depends what. No, New York would be hard, man. New York I'd like because there's a lot of Irish people there. Boston, I'd love to go to Boston. New York I'd like because I go to New York and I feel it feels very at home in certain parts. Other parts not at all. You know, I'm in Chinatown. I'm like, where is this? But I was in like Irish parts, Irish bars and stuff, obviously. And I'd go in there and I'd meet people from Ireland who just moved over, working in the bars and stuff, and that is just really shocking. And it's very homely for that reason. I'd love to look at California as well. I think you're that neck of the woods, aren't you?
Yeah, you didn't come out to the West Coast, right? Or did you? LA.
I was in LA. I was in LA. Yeah, but you're
so LA.
I don't want to badmouth the home state, but my God, I hated LA. LA was one of the worst places I've been in my life. LA felt very, very like alien, like very like hostile. I have a little bit of Spanish, and I was literally like using my Spanish there, but it's not even that. It's not even like the fact that it's not like, you know, it's not an American state. It's very like big and sparse and open. It doesn't have the high rises. It feels like this giant suburb. It's very, very hard to describe, but I didn't like the feeling at all.
So what's the status of Ireland in your view? Is Conor McGregor going to take over and become king and conquer it for Christianity and destroy the woke and the left and the immigration?
Well, this is it. So this is what we're looking at. And we're saying like the Irish have woken up, as many people have said. The Irish are like having this instinct turned on. The threat detection center is clicking on, and everybody in Ireland is like, maybe me and you arrived to these positions by thinking it through a little bit early. And then now a lot of people are starting to catch up. So the mob is coming, the mob is awakening and yet retching and yearning. And a lot of things are happening in Ireland that are forcing people's hands. For example, Ireland is very expensive now. Like, we're basically on parity. I go to New York, and New York's expensive. Ireland's not much better. Like, Ireland's getting close to there. Dublin is like crazy and stuff like this. And so the youth are all leaving Ireland. So there's a lot of brutal things about Ireland right now. And basically half of people my age just leave the country. So we have like a huge diaspora of like something like 150,000 people in Australia. And remember that like our generational demographics are quite small. There's only 5 million people. So like 150,000 out of like 300,000 is like 1 in 2 people just leave the country type thing. And a lot of people in America, obviously, as well. So there is this exodus of the young. And then the old, there's no real industry in Ireland. There's no real tech scene in many ways. So like a lot of it is contained in property. That's where a lot of the wealth goes. So the property market's going up. And then all these older boomers, if you will, like, this is a bit of anti-boomer propaganda, but they get they all obviously are connected with the government, and they get these contracts off the government to create migrant hotels. This is the big thing. We call them IPAS centers, IPAS centers. And this is where the EU says, if you take in the certain amount of migrants, we'll give you $200 million. And then the $200 million go to the government. The government gives contracts out to hotel owners or property owners to do this. So there's these huge amount, there's like these asylum landlord, like, millionaires that are getting these things and renting them out. And all across the country, people are like getting very red pilled on this, like the local people, because I say anything that's anti-migrant, if you will. 5 years ago, people would call you a maniac. They'd be like, you're an absolute racist maniac, this type of thing. But then they go down to their street, and there's all these buses trying to move somebody into this, like the center hotel in the street. And the hotel has been shut off now for 3 months. And that's really rad. Like, people are being like, what the fuck is going on here? So people are like in Ireland, just completely organically, just going out into their little Irish towns and just like doing protest marches and standing around and being like, in their Irish accents, being like, fuck off. You're not fucking getting in here with these people. And it's really radical, and it's very grassroots. And it's like shocking to see it just kind of come out. Like these type of storms, and the consensus across the board is very, very strong. But Ireland's problem is we're like a small state. So we're like Arkansas or like Texas. No, we're smaller than Texas. We're a very, very small state of basically farmers and property owners. And so we don't have a very sophisticated political system and political caste. We don't have any like counter elite in any way. And so the Irish, like, we have a populist energy, but it's like a headless chicken in many ways. And Ireland's been designed this way. We've been ruled for 800 years by an administration in Dublin. So like the political system's brilliant at keeping the populist energy cooking and keeping it under down. So there's a lot of people who are very riled up about Ireland. They want they're right now saying like, why? This is the thing. I talk to people, and it's kind of tragic, but it's like the normal person doesn't understand why that's happening. There's this kind of deceptive confusion about it because they're in a state of demoralization where for the past 10 years, Ireland has been the champions of the woke in Europe. We've been the most progressive to make up for our Catholicism, The posterior medial frontal cortex is turned off, and we went full open borders, full bring in all the immigrants, full anti-Catholic, full feminism, we do abortion rights. We're going to have gay marriage. We're going to have a gay prime minister. He's going to have a gay Indian prime minister. So we're doing all the values of the woke. And now people are like kind of waking up from that party and getting the hangover where everything's getting expensive. The real estate class are basically rinsing the rest of the country. And people are now, Ireland was 96 or 7% Irish or white, at least, when I was like in year 2000, when I existed. And now when I was a baby, and now it's 77%. So it's been so fast and so quick. And so a lot of people are waking up. And a lot of people are getting shocked by this. They're getting put in a state of shock, and their instincts are coming on. But the cultural momentum was so heavy in one direction. They don't even understand what's happening. They don't understand the like what is the political mechanisms for this? What is the moral mechanisms? People are still trapped in the morality of liberalism because it's so heavy and so strong. So what happens now in Ireland is a lot of people try to copy America. So we think that what we need to do is do a version of Donald Trump, and this is becoming like a big problem, because like people are coming out and I'm even seeing this thing where like a lot of guys are like trying to shill for Israel, which is the stupidest thing to do in Ireland. Maybe if you think Israel's based because they've got guns and they've got an army, fair enough, whatever you're into, but like it's just not a politically intelligent thing. And then people get these like make Ireland great again hats and stuff. So we're like, we don't know what to do. A lot of the populists don't know what to do, so they're copying models they see abroad, and obviously America's a big one. And even Connor is like going over being like, America, you can be our big brother and help us out, help me and all this type of stuff. So there's this big issue. Connor's trying to stand up, and the establishment regime just basically, they had stuff on him. Like he'd go out drinking and partying, and so they got him, they got him with a woman of the night that he shouldn't have been hanging around with, and he got in trouble for that, and it's tarnished his reputation. So there's huge issues with this, and I don't think Connor will find it hard. He could, but he'll find it. He's very young, so he could in time, but he'll find it very hard to get through the establishment, which is like very, very callous and resistant against this. So there's a kind of breakdown of Ireland at the moment.
They've been a very anti-Israel too, and I've seen the Israelis talk a lot about sending Palestinians to Ireland. But yeah, so the Fighting Irish, you think the Fighting Irish are being activated? The history of generations, centuries fighting off the empire and the island to the east of England, and now you guys are gonna fight back and take back the island. You think it's happening?
Ireland,
have you been activated?
It'd need a specific political operation to do that. It'd need like politics.
That's what I was going to ask. Is the government shut? Like you said, there's hate speech laws. What is the government doing? Are they still saying? I know Starmer, and I think it talked about like hold on. It was Canada and Starmer in England talked about like having less immigration and like us disappearing. Is there any of that going on in the government in Ireland?
A little bit, yeah, but that's like, it's always a danger because the problem is that you have an establishment, if you so will, and they are very much they're kind of lackeys. They're like they do what the international forces and the EU and all them tell them to do. And it's a question actually of sovereignty. That's really the issue. It's like, is Ireland controlled by the Irish? And the answer is no. And the answer to that, the reason why that is because the Irish aren't politically organized for nationalist purposes, because people don't even understand what nationalism is anymore, this type of thing. And so our problem is like Starmer can come in and he can say he can control the populist energy by saying like nice things and kind of wiping it out. But England are going very, very hard against their own population. Ireland, for example, is talking about hate speech, but they're getting hit, but they're really, really tentative about it. They're really worried about it. And we're actually seems like we're in a very good position with that, where we're kind of like holding off in a little bit, but they could force it through and things could happen. You never know. But like, for example, Trump is giving them huge hassle because there's a lot of Trump, and the Americans have a huge leverage over the Irish, and they actually like the Irish a lot. So when the Irish regime starts to threaten hate speech laws, the Irish are basically like tax scammers, so they give really low taxes to corporations. So Facebook and all that move over there and pay their taxes there. And and pharmaceutical companies and stuff. And so Trump has basically said, listen, we'll just like tell all those companies to come back and you'll go broke if you don't do what we tell you. And so there's this little bit of bullying going on with Ireland. And it's taming them a little bit on that front, which is why the Americans are actually quite a great help. And but then like the problem in Ireland is the political vehicle. It's a very, very difficult problem. Like, it is a really difficult problem because the spirit's there. Like, there's young kids that go to prison for burning down these asylum centers, and we don't condone violence and all that. But this is showing you that the grassroots are like they've got teeth. They're like scary. Those guys are not joking. They're not there to be like, let's make TikToks. They're like, one kid went to prison for this because they're insane. They're willing to like take on the police. Up in the north, they were fighting against the police and stuff like this. So it's very, and they have these protests and they get tens of thousands of people out to them. Like, there is a very large organic grassroots movement, but the political force is an incredibly difficult problem, because that is about saying, how do you get sophisticated representatives that have a nationalist morality and are also intelligent enough to run a country. And it's like, it's a tough problem, man. And it's very taboo to go towards it. It's very new. It's only been the last couple of years. And like a lot of the rhetoric, we're still stuck on saying stuff like immigration, when maybe it should be going more towards something like, maybe affordability in housing, which is related to immigration, or maybe, people are getting caught up with the Gaza Israel thing, where they're getting into their heads that they need to take positions on this. And there's political issues in Ireland at the moment.
Yeah, good analysis of that. I don't keep too much tabs on Ireland, so it's interesting to hear. You guys are almost like the Petri dish, or like the beta test, because you're like such a small little nation. And, you guys can, if you have some success, so there's like nationwide protests. Is a lot of the nationalist movement rooted in religion?
Yeah, like I don't notice it specifically. No.
Is there a pagan revival in Ireland?
No,
Celtic?
no. It'll be Catholic. People will be forcefully Catholic, and I'm obviously very explicit Nietzschean, and I say some crazy things about it, and I don't get much grief about it, which is quite interesting, because I think, as I just described earlier, the nationalist question is a big one. In fact, the strength of Ireland is that it has a really strong national identity, as much as we do of Catholicism. And the national identity is actually really way more powerful, because that's very recent. We only really formed our national identity about 150 years ago properly. It's been there forever, but it got formalized and turned into a revolutionary political force. So like a lot of people default to Irish nationalism. We have all these like songs, the trad songs, the Irish traditional music, the folk songs. We have all this music that is like 100 years old, 150 years old. So there's actually not a huge need to appeal to a religious identity. Where America is quite fascinating, because your national myth is, like, unfortunately, kind of like a diverse collection of European people who come together, which is very easily bent into the idea that like you should be diverse and open borders, this type of thing. Whereas then the identity of a Christian American is very, very strong. It's a central part of it. And Irish, yeah, that's there. But I notice like most people I speak to is just they're nationalists. That's the thing that and they have very little shame about using that word and that like self-concept. And it's interesting because it's like very implicitly a race question. It's a tribe thing, but it's not. It's very hard in Ireland to call someone a racist for being a nationalist, because that just sounds ludicrous. It's like, because it's such a fresh and well structured and artistic identity. Actually, there's so many artists that put in like music and all this into it.
Right. You guys were the slaves. You didn't enslave others. You're just your own little redhead, freckled, white country. So it's like, if you can't be a nationalist, trying to say that it's immoral or evil to say that like Ireland shouldn't stay Irish is like a hard sell, especially compared to America, right?
No, actually, not what you'd think. No, not in that way. It's weird. How could I describe this properly? They do that a lot, and the way they frame it is like pointing out that it's the woke liberal perspective, where they say that nationalism is associated with stupidity and backwards thinking and being inbred and stuff like this. And they use terms like racism. They do avoid nationalism. They'll use the term like racist. And they'll do stuff like, if you say you're a nationalist, they'll say something like, yeah, well, you're actually just a racist. And they do stuff like, they'll say stuff like, can you speak the Irish language? Which is a good one. That's a good catch, because a lot of people can't, So if you're a nationalist, but you can't speak Gaelic, you're not a really good nationalist, are you? You don't really believe this stuff. And
can you?
This type of thing. Very weakly. I was taught properly when I was younger, but I'm out of practice. They'd catch me on that, they'd catch me on that. I have to brush up. But this is the thing. So like it's the way it's enforced is very similar to America, where it's like there's some sort of quasi spiritual moral war taking place. The culture war is a moral war, where you're like, all right, racism is closed-minded, is against the utopia of the open society. And therefore, this is evil. And if you're a nationalist, you're closed. You want to close off from the world. You want to shut down. You want to pull people back into ignorance because you're simple and stupid and you don't understand how the world works. And this is the kind of clash that's happening. And obviously, the nationalists are saying we are healthy. We're under threat. We're under danger. We want to create an organized bioorganic unit that is able to remain healthy and compete against the rest of the world to make sure we don't get taken advantage of. And the woke tards are like these open-minded idiots that are almost like, an immune system that can't stop parasites from coming in type of thing. And these are the kind of like world perspectives that are at war here. And so in Ireland, it's the exact same. And there's all these attempts to put together rhetoric to make all this cohere together and coagulate and be successful. But yeah, that's the frame, I'd say.
All right, I'm going to get these power chats turned on, guys. The links in the live chat and the description below where we're streaming on Odysee and Rumble. We'll play that one that came through, and any more that you guys have. Any questions or comments for Uberboyo? Let's see. Let's expand this. And I want you, this is Michael O'Keefe. You follow him. He's an Irish nationalist guy. Big account.
Yeah. Chopper.
Yeah, what's that?
It's people call him Chopper. He's Nick O'Keefe, all right, yeah.
Right. He shared this. He says, shocking footage from Ireland today. We are losing our country. Looks like some African Christian thing. Is it this bad over there?
No. Like this stuff is there. That's true. It's been very.
Yeah. What percentage of Ireland is Irish right now?
Like, see, it's a context thing. So it's 77%, I think, is Irish. Might be less that's actually Irish. I think it's white to 77%. I don't know the
like,
stats exactly.
When you were born, what was it? Like 99%?
95 or something like that, 96. And in white Irish specifically, maybe it was more like 90. I'm actually not too sure exactly, but there was a report done in 2024 that shocked a lot of people because it's like down a lot. It's like close to England's level now. And that's
especially in all the big cities, right? That's where it's concentrated in the highest percentages of non-Irish.
Again, Ireland's weird because Ireland's small, so there's not many big cities, number one. And number two, the way this is orchestrated is, I described that thing about the asylum center guys. That's the way this is happening. So if somebody owns property in a small town, they will move in loads of people into a town with like 200 people. And all of a sudden the town will be replaced. So Dublin's bad. It's not that bad. Like Dublin's changed.
Is that happening a lot? I was going to ask that. I was wondering, does that happen a lot that like they just bring into some rural small town and then they just bring in tons of immigrants by the truckload and they just take over and have their own little Somalia or something in there? Is that the common thing?
That's where I see a lot of the protests. There'd be a little town with 1,000 people, and there's a plan for an asylum center with like 200 people, and they all just get out in the streets because they all know each other. They just talk to each other, and they're like, "What is going on?" And they all just say like, and then they'll find the guy who's doing it, and they will drag him. They'll be like, "What?" They'll sit him down and be like, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" And that's actually pretty interesting because that's the pressure point. And then he starts to get worried because he's getting all the social pressure and he stops. Because he's like a lot of these guys, the hotel guys, are doing it for greed, but they have a moral cover. They're a good person who's helping the poor refugees, and that's a good non-racist thing to do. And they also get a couple of $1 million for it. So they're delighted. They get an EU contract for it. And so then the locals will discover this, drag him out and be like, what the fuck do you think you're doing, Mick? This type of thing. And I've seen like there's a place called Longford in the Midlands, very small place, and it's just freakish when you go there. You're like, whoa, what the fuck happened here? I remember when I was younger and it was like, it was an Irish town. It's literally like it's gone. It's just been wiped. It's crazy. And then there's other places that just really fight against that stuff. I've seen several, like you'd be passing through a town and then it's just like they're all out in the street giving out about it. And so it's a very interesting thing because Dublin's big, but Dublin's only like 1 million people. It's not that big. It's not a very big city at all. And it's so like, and then on top of that, like Dublin doesn't have a huge amount of space, so it's not like they're doing a huge amount of that in Dublin either. And there's a lot of resistance in Dublin. That's where like a lot of the political forces, So Dublin is like, it's a multicultural city in many ways, but it's not like London city center or Paris. It's more moderate. And like again, I come from the context of going to somewhere like New York, and I'm like, this is like, it could be, New York feels like 25% European, like white. It's crazy going there, very, very strange. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, like how do you frame this? Because maybe New York has been like that for longer. So Ireland's more shocking, but Ireland's definitely not there. Definitely not there.
That's so sad. I got to get over there before it gets any worse.
Yeah.
Here, let's
Yeah.
play this real quick. This super chat. Hold on, and then I want to get into the Sydney Sweeney is Nazi propaganda and woke is dead. Okay, what's that?
Indomitably
Hold on.
Based sent $50 on
Yo,
Rumble.
thanks, buddy.
Christian moralizing, or I should say moral, is so readily weaponized to push any kind of leftist, communist, anti-white thing. Gee, I wonder who created this poison pill within Christianity.
Yeah, if Christianity is the original woke movement and it led to liberalism, is Catholicism in Ireland what's led to the modern extreme woke?
No, I don't like. I'll give you my take on this because I'm going to go back to that neuroscience stuff. I know maybe it's a little bit wordy. Apologies, Adam, if I'm annoying you or the audience.
No, I like the brain stuff. I like that.
Well,
Evolutionary
like,
psychology type of things. I think it's cool.
Well, this is really what I've been thinking about in regards to Christianity.
Hold on. Sorry.
White_stag sent $5 on Rumble. Liam here. My Irish friends call me Limo. Just thought that was fun. Would Adam be a Damo?
I don't know. What's my Irish name?
I wonder. I actually don't know. What would an Adam be called? Adamo. No, you wouldn't say that. I can't think of anybody. Maybe Adam, Addo, something like that. Maybe Addo. Maybe people would go with Addo. I could imagine that. Maybe. So you'd probably be called by your second name, like Greeno. Green. Yeah, I could see them calling you Green.
Yep, that would be good.
Yeah. Just on the Catholic question, if so, right now, I find this quite fascinating because there's obviously there's this big pro-Catholic movement, and again, I'm trying to describe the objective idea of what's happening here. I think it is this small little institution in our brains, but scale this to millions of people, and this becomes an actual enormous institution. This is the part of our brain that generates morality, and it generates nationalism and religiosity together. The race god is the natural structure inside of this brain. And when you get put under threat, this is why it turns on. And when it turns off, you get wokeism. So there's something definitely objective here that allows much more clear thinking about all this. And it allows a lot of these arguments to have some type of ground. I'm not saying it's the absolute truth, but it gives some type of ground. So there's a lot of people who feel the threats of replacement or lack of sovereignty. The Americans would be like, oh, we don't feel like we're in control of our country. We feel like we're getting replaced. And there's a hostile elite that don't like us. And in response to this, people's instincts turn on. They become nationalists and they start to look for a religious explanation of the world. These two things always come together. And some people go pagan, some people go whatever. But it's a big thing to become Catholic now. And people will be like base Catholicism and all this. And the thing is I'm a cradle Catholic. So I've been in the Catholic Church my whole life and I've seen what it does. And so I would in 2022, I used to go to the church because Jung would always say it's good to connect with your roots. And I do agree with that. I actually like going to the church and stuff like this. It's good to just be around that ritualistic thing because there's so little of that in modernity. But I go there and I go to an actual Catholic church all the time. I've been to it a lot. I was recently, my grandmother died. So I was in the church burying her. I was doing speeches and everything. And I know what it is. I've seen it. I know what it is. In 2022, there was a preacher who was telling this tiny little Irish town the virtues of immigration in the middle of a thing, in the middle of a little church thing. This is some priest comes in and he had just been in placement in China and he's talking about how good multiculturalism is. And he just did this lecture in the middle of it about this in church to a load of farmers. And it's this is what the church is. People are telling me stuff like, oh, the church is so based. And I'm like, maybe historically, but now it is a very pernicious force. It is very, very bad that you have this tiny little town and these guys are coming in and doing this type of stuff. And then even they always bring in priests from Africa and stuff like this. And you go in, you get on great with them, you treat them as individuals. There's no need to be whatever with them, but you understand these guys aren't supposed to be here and they can't speak English and stuff like this. And it's the church that's coordinating this. You look at the Pope. The Pope is talking about the virtues of immigration and this type of stuff and the need to take in this type of thing. So the Catholic Church as an institution, people have these nationalist delusions about it. Maybe if you took it over, you could change it. And I'm sure the younger priests in the church might be an interesting demographic to study. But as it is right now, a manifest institution as it is right now, the level of the self-deception people have about it just astounds me. It just floors me all the time. And it's like you would have to take over the church as seriously as people are trying to take over political institutions to change the church. because the church at the highest levels is promoting these ideals. It's very, very strange. And yeah, so like that's the thing. It's like what is the function of the church? The church right now, the Catholic Church in Ireland, as it's spreading out, depends obviously on the priest, but most of the ones I've been in are having this. They're promoting liberal open world values. Why? Because it's a global institution. It's the biggest institution in the fucking world. It has billions. It's like the largest YouTube channel of all. You know, it has billions of subscribers all across the world, and the values it's going to promote are going to be open. Because that's what you do when you're a regal imperial force. You promote openness, and you take African priests and bring them into Ireland, and you create this interchange, and you create this globalizing effect, and you homogenize everything under the one true God and the one true church, because that's what it does. And you suppress these instincts and do this openness, and this suits you. This is what your incentives are to do this. So the church is very much operating like this. And people would say maybe before Vatican II it was different, and I agree 100%. But just dealing with it not in the ideal, but as it is right now. That's the thing that always astounds me, is that like you go in right now and it is a institution that is almost like helping digest the spirit of the nations that it's a part of, so that they can open up. You know, that's what it's doing. That's why I see it as. So I don't know if it's a pretty big black pill for a lot of people, but like that's what I see.
Okay, another power chat here, and then I want to get to this Sydney Sweeney segment of the show. And let's get this to play, though, please. Where was it? Archie. Let's go. Let's hear it. Okay, it's not playing. It'll probably hit on in a second. There it is.
Archie sent $14. Missed the show with Scribina. Good to see Uberboyo. Talks with Scribina and Boyo point Western man in a direction that's better than the direction that Shapiro and Peterson are pointing. I want Europeans to have self-determination.
I can't hear
Jesus is not my leader.
Oh, my bad. Did you read it?
It's something about Jordan Peterson.
Brother BD sent $5 on Rumble. How's it going with the bio-digital convergence surveillance system? Has Ireland switched over to digital currency yet?
You got a digital currency over in Ireland? Oh, hold on. There's the Archie one.
Sent $14.
There's the one you
missed
missed.
The show with Scribina. Good to see Uberboyo. Talks with Scribina and Boyo point Western man in a direction that's better than the direction that Shapiro and Peterson are pointing. I want Europeans to have self-determination. Jesus is not my leader.
Yeah, better than Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro. Although you did just talk about going to church, going to Catholic church, and saying that's important. Yeah, it's a threat and it's a problem, but you still want to go there, huh?
So this is an interesting paradox, but it's like you don't live in like away from these things, and so like for example, like my grandmother dies. What am I to do? Like bury her in the backyard? Like it's and like what am I going to tell my family? Like you're going to have to participate in your tradition on some level, and I actually think it's good to also see this stuff, because if I wasn't going, I know for certain what is going on with Catholicism. People online would be telling me it's something, and then you go and you actually see what it is. It's really eye opening, I find. And we don't have a replacement religion. I've actually said this to you before, that we go in and we try to say to Christians who are in a state of deep anxiety because they're seeing this change happening in the world and all the atheism and all the sin, of like engaging in the degeneracy of the modern world. And we say to them, and they say they feel their threat detection turn on, and they clutch to something that is stable and regal and powerful and ancient, which is their ancestral religion, and their family maybe in the countryside still go to it, and a couple of their cousins. And this is going to give them this access point to deal with like really serious psychological problems, which is death, burial, and marriage, these type of things. And then if we come in and we say to them, that's all fake, intellectually maybe you can hit them with that, but then there's this enormous problem where they have nothing that's going to bring them over into new institutions. Like Survive the Jive is trying to rebuild paganism, and that's actually intelligent because he can offer people ways to get married. He can offer people ways to do funerals, which are actually very, very basic things that you would overlook. But this is what religions do. They sanctify these things. They give people capacity to psychologically process these very, very difficult problems. And like if you were an atheist and you're like your mom or something like that dies, how do you even do that? Like, how does that work? It'd be weird. Would it feel weird if you're doing it the wrong way? Would she want it? like these are all questions, if she was a traditionalist Christian, well, like what do you do with this? So it is very important to also understand the flux we're in, where we're stuck in a tradition. It has its rituals. There's nothing to springboard over to. Paganism is not sophisticated in many ways, although a lot of people, it's actually moved forward a lot in the last like 10 years. But that you're not like giving people the lifeboat. If we want to say the ship's sinking, we're like shooting the ship from underneath them, and they're like, "Oh, we're just going to drown." Like, and then you have to sort of say, "Well, there's these passages out." It's not. I notice it's not just an intellectual thing. So maybe that's cope, but that's me trying to be reasonable here.
Well, I like the idea of going to church to see what they're actually about instead of listening to how it's portrayed by e-crusaders on the internet. I plan on doing that actually very soon. So let me ask you about the Sydney Sweeney thing, okay? I've been a new jeans ad slammed as Nazi propaganda by the crazed woke mob. That's headline number 1 in Post from New York Post. And then again, Nazi propaganda, crazed woke mob over jeans pun. Everybody saying, we're so back. This is what they took from us, the memes. We got the blonde hair, blue-eyed girl next door. Shilling these jeans. People doing memes like this with the sun.
Yeah.
Honor.
It's like it's something that you've sort of pointed out many times for years, actually. And you've said that like MAGA could be used as a weapon of deception if it was wanted to. And again, bringing it back to this neuroscience thing I'm talking about, like what am I saying when I say to you that wokeism has a neurological basis, and everybody's like based atheists, libtards, anti-racists. It's clearly fake. We shouldn't do it and all this. But then you move over and you switch on this part of your brain and you develop this based tribal race God perspective, which is the kind of canonical version of the right in the abstract. But it does come with this caveat, this catch, which is its propensity towards cognitive dissonance. And this is a very, very interesting problem. Why? Because this cognitive dissonance is something that makes you close-minded to the group. It feeds into groupthink. And this is a problem for you on a personal level because it stops you thinking clearly. But it is a benefit because you participate in a group, you have the best chance to succeed in evolutionary struggle of life. This is why you have tribalism inside of you, because it's the way you succeed. You need a nation, you need a collective, you need collective political action. Now, the problem is in advanced politics, you can take advantage of people who have these mechanisms in their head. If I can scare you and I can give you I can dangle in front of you images of your identity, and it will trigger on this part of your brain that literally makes you stupid. It shuts off your brain and makes you cognitively dissonant. This is something that I can weaponize, definitely. And this sounds schizo, but this is actually like formally studied and done in American politics, because America is the most advanced democracy that's ever existed. And the American politics, they have the Southern strategies. This is talked about all the time. And this is the idea that in order to win the southern states, to win the presidency, you need to play into their identity a little bit, their identity crisis. So they do a little bit of casual racism. This is what GOP do. They do this like kind of soft racism to stir up the anxieties of the white rednecks in the Republican Rust Belt, in the Sun Belt. And they get them to sort of be like, like this guy's kind of winking to us that he's one of our guys. And they give you flickers of your identity. And then you get on board with him forcefully. And he just wins the presidency. And he can tell you whatever he wants. The second he gets into power, he does something else. And this is like, the sleight of hand, the way the politics is done now, where it's identity control. It's what Starmer is doing in the UK. He's throwing crumbs to the right in the UK and sort of saying to them, look, I'll take care of this immigration thing, which is the source of their identity. And then they'll give up on the idea of getting their own sovereignty, and they'll fall for, a false messiah, if you so will. And again, you were always pointing this out in your own terms that like, yeah, Trump is doing this breadcrumbing for people. Like, you've got to be careful with this. And this is like a mechanism that makes sense, that you can go and you can do this. So the reason why I say this all with Sydney Sweeney is that beautiful girl, I'm sure she's lovely, but all this stuff you're seeing, the woke getting put away, this does seem like the sort of immune system of this. The system is finding a way of manufacturing consent now once again, and handing the anxious white Americans that voted for Trump, handing them the identity that they want, so that
this is the false savior. This is our false savior. Is that what you're kind of getting at there?
It's like if you're getting if you're getting things that are reaffirming your identity from something that you would generally consider to be hostile and not sovereign, not
Yeah.
representing you, there's probably something weird going on. There's probably
Mhm.
something dodgy going on. And again, you've always been saying this. Been pointing this out loads, that it's very easy to throw breadcrumbs, but then like in the back rooms, the people that the likes of Trump are talking to are not on your team at all. This type of
Mhm.
thing. And so, you're getting this blonde girl, big tits, and like parade her around, and then you'll say America is saved, and it's like that's not that. Sydney Sweeney's not going to save America. Like what is going to save America is like a whole revolution in the concept of sovereignty. A counter elite would have to get into power and change the way the institutions are ran. And you even see someone like Musk. This happened to him. He got the breadcrumbs of his identity, which is to be a libertarian. And literally, this is one of the richest people in the world was told, we'll just let you in and you can audit the government and you can get, and then he gets closer and closer and closer. And then they kind of they do the sleight of hand and they're like, fuck off, dude, this is not for you, this type of thing. And he has a chimp out because of it, because his identity was tickled. And then when it came to getting the goods, they pulled the rug, this type of thing. So this is Sydney. It's good that at least you're getting a positive self-image. Obviously, in the psychological level, it's not demoralizing propaganda. That's great, but like you have to get a little bit of the creeps off this a little bit. It's like I don't know, man. I don't know. They're trying to like nudge us a little bit, and maybe it's a Southern strategy thing, is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, is this for them to sell jeans? Like, are they trying to sell jeans with this? You think a bunch of blonde girls are going to run out and want to buy jeans now? Is that what the point of this is? And it's funny, the chimp outs. Go ahead.
I would also
Say?
see this as like things happening in elite culture, because like the shareholders of all these companies. It's not like necessarily the jeans company is an independent entity. Like if you look at Rumble or Twitter, they're owned by like all these investors. I think BlackRock owns like a significant amount of Twitter. I don't quite know the specifics on that. But like you would say, oh, BlackRock, this type of thing. But these big institutions would own all these. Like a lot of the DEI environmental stuff, the ESG, I think it's called, those standards for advertising, that was the woke advertising, that was all coming from these giant corporate shareholding systems that owned these shareholder things in the company. So then the shareholder meeting happens, and the CEO of the company is like, I want to sell jeans, but the shareholder says, well, we must ethically sell jeans by doing this. So what's happening in these boardrooms is they're now saying, yeah, we need to put the woke away. It was too much. It's caused this big riot. Like maybe it's like, maybe the Israelis are getting anxious about how it's stimulating all these leftist protesters or something like this, or maybe they're seeing the anxiety in the white Americans that they want to exploit and all, or they want to take advantage of, or something like this. Maybe that's the cynicalist way that you can read it. But that is I'd imagine what's going on. They're like, all right, America's identity should be white blonde, and if we want to retain our power, it's like a religious system. The European kings would follow Christianity, even though they're functionally like warrior pagans. They would offer Christianity because it gives them the divine right of kings. It gives them the mandate of heaven. It allows them to sustain their power. So they would use the religion to placate the people. And you wonder, is this it? Is this like the Southern strategy happening here? Give the people images that flatter them, that they like, give them big tits and blonde girls, and this will make them happy. And then there's going to be no discontent and this type of thing. And that would make sense, because it seems like there's a huge populist uprising. And maybe there's anxiety among the shareholders that they're losing the left, or the left are becoming more unstable. Like the left are assassinating people, And so the right seems like a very cozy clientele to kind of work in this way. So it makes you wonder, like maybe it's more sincere, but it's good to be skeptical is all I'd say. Good to not be a trick, not be an idiot.
This Jewish comedian here they do a pun on jeans. I mean, you could see how this would be triggering and trying to create a social media buzz and get everybody talking, thinking about the brand.
Genes are passed down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. My genes are blue.
Sydney Sweeney, Casper Jeans.
So great genes, talking about inherited traits. People are calling it eugenics. Like this Jewish comedian says, like in a Nazi way, totally. 105,000 likes. All these videos of a bunch of Girls that look like this seething. Let's listen to this one too.
Should we be surprised that a company whose name is literally American Eagle is making fascist propaganda like this? Probably not, but it's...
So the eagle, like the fascists, like the Germans, like the Romans. This is the eagle of Edom, by the way. Interesting enough.
Still really shocking. Like, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman is talking about her good genes. Like, that is Nazi propaganda. Should we be surprised?
Is she wrong? I don't think she's wrong, to be honest. And that's why we all love it so much. So what is going on here? Guess what, guys? The CEO's Jewish and works with Chabad Lubavitch. Yeah, I'm going to get there in a second. Yeah. Here, I'll just, since I mentioned it.
Of American Evil, what's her name? Oh my God, that's crazy. Jesus.
Look. American Eagle now has a mezuzah at its Times Square flagship office. The apparel brand CEO J.L. Schottenstein is well known for his charitable Jewish contributions, including to Chabad Lubavitch.
That's crazy. So, damn. So it must be that. That's interesting. So the psychology of the shareholders then is that they are sitting down there and saying like they need a source of consent. They need the Americans to be on their side, and so they want to give them, because what they've done for the last while is the woke energy has just bashed the American identity and humiliated and crushed it into the ground, and so they're now like literally switching stances because they want to get that identity more affirmative and get people, the white Americans, to feel more positive about them, the right, basically. So yeah, it could be a Southern strategy to manufacture consent or something like that, and you might see this more and more. It is actually like an interesting problem then, because like a lot of people say, well, this is what we want. We don't want to be demoralized for being blonde or whatever. But maybe your problem is that you're not sovereign, and that's the big red pill. But again, I'm not an American, so I cannot comment on that. But
it's funny how
issues in Ireland.
Yeah, it's crazy how like the narrative everywhere is this is Nazi propaganda. It's eugenics, and then it's actually, so the narrative is, oh, evil white America, right? And then it turns out that it's a Chabad-connected Jewish CEO that's running the company. Isn't that interesting?
It's very bizarre, yeah. It's very bizarre. Like the thing that makes me think is like, because what I'm trying to describe, again, when I bring up the neuroscience, is that there's mechanisms in our heads that manipulate our morality and manipulate our identity. And we've just gone through the woke culture war, which was predicated on morality and identity. And it was a really traumatizing experience that has significantly changed the entire shape of our civilization. And I look at this and I try to follow its conclusions and say, well, listen, there's these mechanisms in our head that actually can be manipulated, as I said. And it also makes me wonder then is that like have advanced political actors been able to manipulate this for a long time? For example, the Wall Street, do you remember that famous graph where Occupy Wall Street kicked up with the left? Remember, this happens. So Occupy Wall Street kicked up with the left in like 2010 or something. I was too young to really understand what was going on, but I remember that happening. And right after that, that's where you see the arrival of all the woke stuff, because they start to do this identity politics. Why? Because they're dissolving the left's anti-capitalist big bank energy, and they absorbed it into this identity thing. So it's almost like these really powerful Wall Street actors they're actually skilled at politics. They're really good at this, and they understand that there's an identity crisis within the left, which is based on these minority ideas. So they were able to push into that and affirm that identity of being minorities and take advantage of that, and then dissolve the left's capitalist energy going after the banks and turn them into this unbelievably powerful corporate force that allowed them to just do very well. And now that beast has become a problem. So maybe they're pivoting back and they're doing the same thing. They're doing a Southern strategy now on the right and flattering that identity so that they can turn it into a useful political force, which they'll use for the next 10 years. And then when that runs out, they'll like switch back to that. And you're kind of like dancing between the two forces this way. And what they're intuitively doing, because they're professional, so they're very skilled. They probably don't understand this, but intuitively they're like triggering, they're turning this thing off, turning it on, depending on which side they're going, just so they can reinforce that identity and use it to harvest consent. So maybe that
it's Chabad connected Jewish CEO injecting the Nazi eugenicist to trigger both sides. So that's what's at the forefront of the zeitgeist and like our culture. with this ad campaign. And look, this cartoon breaks it down perfectly. The woke left saying, if you like that, you're a fascist. And then the young Gen Z guy, Dad, I think I'm a fascist.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, do you think then that like the right are going to have a up ramp now for the next while, where you like being right wing will be like permissed? Or do you think there's going to be like a censorship snapback at some point?
They're using it as the villain and depicting America as the American eagle, the Edom, white supremacist, Nazi like America.
So okay, so I'm suggesting
that's what I think. That's what I think this is doing.
So I'm suggesting that they're using it to harvest consent by giving white Americans a positive identity, so that they're like on board. Do you think it's actually not? That's even too far. You're just sort of saying that they're just causing chaos and rallying up the left a little bit more and trying to move
rallying both sides on that issue, exactly.
And so they're trying to move the left's attention away from, protesting in universities and move their attention more towards just thinking, like, go back to being about the giving out about the Nazi.
Stop focusing on Israel and Palestine. It's the Nazis you got to worry about. Exactly. That's what it's getting the left to do. And look, this organization donates more than $200,000 to Chabad in 2020. American Eagle has given Chabad access to the retail giant's gigantic advertising screens in Times Square. Like they're deeply connected. And then they come out with Sydney Sweeney, not good jeans, which is a play on an old advertising campaign, by the way, with what's her name?
That's so crazy. That's so strange.
Look, here's the old one that they redid.
The secret of life lies hidden.
This is Brooke Shields, and apparently she was like young when she did this.
Code. Genes. The secret of life lies hidden in the genetic code. Genes are fundamental in determining the characteristics of an individual and passing on these characteristics to succeeding generations. Occasionally, certain conditions produce a structural change in the gene, which will bring about the process of evolution. This may occur in one or more of the following ways. Firstly, by selective mating, in which a single gene type proves superior in transmitting its genes to future generations. Secondly, by gene drift.
This is what we need to teach Christians that evolution is true, right here. Ads like this.
Certain genes may fade away, while other genes persist. And finally, by natural selection, which filters out those genes better equipped than others to endure in the environment. This may result in the origin
This is Nazi
of an entirely
propaganda.
New species, which brings us to Calvin.
When was this?
And the survival of the fittest.
Calvin Klein genes. I'm not sure what year it was, but pretty amazing. 1980. Calvin Klein, who was Jewish also. Levi also Jewish, interesting enough. Levi's, Calvin Klein, and then now American Eagle.
It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder, is there like, that's an interesting question. So why is that getting pushed that way? Because like that is it's a total inversion of their instincts. So it's very bizarre. I would imagine I see it as the Southern strategy thing. And yeah, like there's maybe this idea that the woke was an overreach situation. So it's winding it all back and throwing bones. But you're suggesting, as you said, like it's chaos, something like that. And it's like what I noticed this in Ireland too. It's something that the Irish have to watch for, because there is this feeling now that the right-wing populist energy is rising. And it's just so dangerous to think that you're in control of these movements and it's all working this way, when it can be very easily used as a Southern strategy to take advantage of your energy and then absorb it. And then all your political will gets spent in a misdirection. And that's really the tragedy of it. This is why you have to be actually quite conscious of this. I guess what I'm saying, again, when I bring up this neuroscience, is that you have this mechanism in your brain that creates cognitive dissonance. So you're actually very vulnerable to this specific type of stuff, where your identity can be easily manipulated, left or right. And like to be self-aware, to know when that's happening is very important.
Here's your Chabad Lubavitch, Sydney Sweeney vulnerability to the male mind right now. Sydney Sweeney reading you the Bible.
I think Sydney.
This makes me love Jesus.
Chronicles, chapter 21, verses 14 to 15. Behold, with a great plague will the Lord smite thy people, and thy children, and thy wives, and all thy goods.
Oh my God, that's talking about what God's going to do to Edom. She's reading the anti-Edom verses? Are you kidding me?
No way, really.
Yeah.
And thou shalt have great sickness by disease of thy bowels, until thy bowels fall out by reason of the sickness day by day. Thy bowels fall out by reason.
Oh yeah, she's in a movie where she's a nun.
Oh my days.
Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it really makes you wonder. Makes you wonder. Well, like I guess that's the thing I'd ask you is that you've been skeptical of the right movement, I guess you could say, in many ways, because you think there's a lot of contradictions inside of it that aren't resolved, and so you're not.
Yeah, it's kosher. It's Jewish. Opposition to the Jews and Zionism is, if it's Christian, it's neo-Judaism opposing Judaism. So it's within the Torah Yahweh plantation.
And where do you see all this going then? Like, obviously there has been an upswing in all this energy. Like, do you see it as it's just going to peter out? What do you see?
It's going to be used for the crackdown, the pretext of the big crackdown and the downfall of the West, if they have their way.
And what do you mean by the crackdown? Like
that's what this is. The Chabad company putting out the hot blonde girl talking about jeans. That's what this is. Everybody kvetching exactly like they knew they would. They purposely tried to trigger it, and they knew all the right wing would love it and eat it up and do the memes and love her and stuff. Like here's another leftist breakdown.
What does this American Eagle Sydney Sweeney jeans campaign have to do with not just race but soap and the current political climate? I'm Sayantani, an author of middle grade and YA books, which I mostly talk about on this app, but I am also a professor of something called narrative medicine. So I teach a lot about race, health, and narrative. And that is exactly why this ad is in my particular wheelhouse and why I will be putting it on my syllabus in the fall.
Oh my God. This is going on the syllabus. Here's the other big one.
Out loud, but was it ever true? They're literally saying the quiet part out loud, but was it ever truly?
They? Who's they, by the way?
That's
is it the Nazis doing this, or is this Chabad Lubavitch and Schottenstein that's putting this out? But who's taking the blame?
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's a really good point. And it goes to show you the kind of ignorance on both sides, because the left, they abstract some random they, which they assume is the white man. And then the right like think that this is just the corporations are suddenly becoming red pilled. What is the meme? Oh, they're going broke because they went woke, so now they're going to all put Sydney Sweeney because they want to make money again. And then you think, wait a second, I don't know. Yeah, interesting.
Quiet when you're wearing dumbass merch like this? I mean, really, make America great again. When was America ever great? Their definition of greatness was when this country was full of white supremacists and that slavery still existed. And now we have this interesting ad with a play on words where we pass on blue genes to those genetically with blue eyes. I mean, it's no accident that Sydney Sweeney's initials are SS.
Are the SS? Oh my days.
No coincidence. The Jews planned every little detail. Like, is that what she's saying?
Very interesting. Yeah,
saying the quiet
that's crazy.
Part out loud, but was it ever truly quiet when you're wearing mass merch like
the SS? Here's another crazy one. I want to hear this one too. Oh, so it's not just the CEO J.L. Schottenstein, who the chat said that I had covered before. The name sounded familiar, that I covered before. Apparently, he's linked to LeBron James, is what they said. Largest donor to Jewish causes, and the company was founded by Mark and Jerry Silverman.
Yeah.
Which was the other one I wanted to show? This one.
Running their ad department. And I just hate when
Did American Eagle just run an ad for eugenics?
Genes are passed down.
To blonde-haired blue.
My genes are blue.
Sydney Sweeney has very keens.
Totally just talking about denim, right? Just
no, obviously not.
Blue-eyed woman explaining how her good genes gave her personality and purity. I mean, are we really going to pretend that this isn't a little fashy coded? Look, I'm not saying that Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah. We're not pretending. It's clearly fashy coded, as she says.
Interesting.
But it was put out by a Chabadnik, basically.
It's like your head's been. So this is yeah, it's crazy. I was saying to you earlier that I had a little bit of hesitation after the Trump win, and that my instincts are sort of saying it. And like, I think this is. I kind of felt that there's something just a little bit off. This seems like things were just too glistening clean, squeaky clean, and it's kind of like this type of stuff where you're like, this doesn't feel good. It feels like someone has ripped your face off and they're not wearing it type thing, and it's like they're using your identity in order to wage grand political. It's like Edward Bernays, was a master in psychological warfare and control, and it's all about understanding these weak points. This is what I'm saying. I point out these neuroscientific mechanisms. I'm so happy. I'm so proud that I studied these because I think they're so interesting. And these people are professionals. Bernays is a professional, so they probably arrive at these things intuitively, and they just know what things to poke at in order to set this stuff off and to get these identities and these things in gear. And it seems like this could be it. That it's like, all right, rile and rally up this identity for the next while, and it will harvest consent. It will harvest this giant mob of magatards who think literally watch this, and they'll get in this dialectic where they're saying well, whatever, fascism is it's totally cool. You see that guy who went on? I saw him on Twitter, and he went to some debate against the woke guy. And the woke guy was like, well, what about immigrants? You sound like a fascist. Well, I am a fascist. And you're just kind of listening, and you're thinking, this is, okay, interesting. It's like,
that's another show. That's another show put on by leftists to make right wingers look like a threat and look bad. That's what that show is.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, the guy that created it is Asian. We just saw this other Asian girl, and he does it to try to make white people and right wingers look crazy and get dunked on. That's what the guy that created that show, Jubilee, with the 1:20, he's got all these tweets about Trump and a fascist and dictator and all stuff like that. So that's what the show's about, and that's what this is about.
That's really interesting. Again, it's of dictating to the whole right wing. I know I'm not doing that, but it is interesting to think to yourself then that it's very easy right now with all the success that you've seen in the culture shift away from the woke. There's this feeling that we can quite easily have, and we can say to ourselves, based, we're winning, our identity is now affirmed. And it's very easy for you to become a useful idiot for all sorts of things, like some guy who just wants to run a show making you look like a dumbass, or even these corporations who are trying to harvest your identity to their advantage, this type of thing. And that is a big issue then, because the mob, the right-wing identity is very much vulnerable to this. This is what I'm kind of pointing out, is that it's a unique vulnerability where if you can just say to someone like Black Sun, Hyperborea based, they'll just instantly, they'll be on your side, and then you can pull them hook, line, and sinker towards whatever goal that you need, which is, maybe get your man in power or something like that. So it's what you've been saying, is that Trump is often like that, and people are not aware of this, and it seems like that's changed an awful lot recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this feels like the Trump effect. There's been a shift since Trump.
This ad to revive the Third Reich, but American Eagle absolutely knew what they were doing here. You don't get to drop lines about inherited traits, blue eyes, and great genes while zooming in on somebody that could have walked straight off of a Nazi propaganda poster and expect people not to catch that reference. Good genes
They didn't see, this is how stupid they think they're so smart and clever. They didn't expect you not to get the reference. It was overt. It's not like some subliminal thing.
That's a great point. That's actually such a good point, because it's like we would sit here and we would say to ourselves, do those idiots not realize that we just spotted their little trick? And then everybody's like, we're so red-pilled.
Yeah, she's like, I'm exposing the Nazis that put this dog whistle in this ad. We're on to you. We see you building your Fourth Reich. That's what she literally says.
It's like bait for a fish that she bites in it, and then she's so smart. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Racial purity and fascist circles, and now it's just denim marketing. We are watching fascist aesthetics sneak back into pop culture through fashion ads, trad wife influencers, and yes, now blue jeans. If you think this was an innocent ad, you have not been paying attention.
Exactly. I agree, guys. If you think this is...
The Sydney Sweeney Aryan Eagle ad is not only xenophobic and racist, it's also scientifically inaccurate. She says genes often determine hair color and eye color. I'm sorry, often?
Always.
That's literally what they do. If they're not determining hair color and eye color, what is? It's giving red pill podcast bro with no marketing experience clearly running their ad department. And I just hate when companies make content.
Oh, that's
You
interesting.
don't think this hold on, you don't think this ad campaign got signed off by the Jewish CEO, by the way? How many? They probably paid her $20 million to do these commercials. What were you going to say?
No, well, that's I just picked up on that. Now that you're pointing this out to me, I can see it. It's like, oh, the self-conception, the world conception these ladies have is they're thinking to themselves, all right, so Joe Rogan, they consulted Joe Rogan, they consulted Chris Williamson or something like this, they consulted someone like me, and they're like, hey, so what type of ad should we run? And they're like, yo, you just gotta go with fucking big tits. And then that's how they thought it went down or something like this. But you're absolutely correct. It's like this was a group of Edward Bernays level shareholders sitting down and saying to themselves, all right, what's the best? There's so much different intention. That's
yeah. This is not about selling jeans. That's the biggest point. Like the Stone Toss comic, jeans. I'm pointing to the whiteboard. Selling more jeans. This is not about jeans. This is for this cultural effect.
I guess that's really fascinating as well. So that's the delusion that we would have on the right, because we would say go woke, go broke, and so we think that they all tried to go woke to sell jeans and then they failed. So now they're going back to blonde tits because that's what's going to sell. And it's just the whole misconception that they're at the very highest level, actually, it's an enforcement of morality is what's going on. They're saying like, what is the ethical moral standards we want to propagate to create the culture via the corporate vehicles that we have to do this? That is the situation. That's like, it's so funny, but we kind of sound like leftists, which is quite interesting because we're talking about like, these structural mechanisms that create, propagate it's the culture industry that propagates out of these institutions, and this is what's going on with it, and it's very cynical in its approach. And yeah, like I think you're correct. I see what you're saying. It's really cool.
She even nails it with the podcast bros. You can see that what they say and how they're perceiving this ad to understand what the probably intended effect was.
With no marketing experience clearly running their ad department. And I just hate when companies make content.
Yeah, it's just some crypto Nazi running this ad campaign. Okay, I'm sure, lady. Yeah, some podcast bro red pillar decided to put out this ad. That's what's going on here.
To use medical or scientific terms and then completely fuck it up. Like, it's not that hard to Google what genes do, how DNA works.
Oh my God, she's just seething.
Do genes often determine our traits, or do they always determine our traits?
Oh my gosh, talk about being pedantic.
That's wild. So that's like, as I was pointing out earlier, like it is obviously significant that those people, like that girl, those ladies you were showing me, have this specific moral outlook where they do hate their own identity in many senses because of they've got this part of their brain shut off. They are the woke. They've got those liberal values. They're atheist. They don't like the affirmation of natural evolutionary identities, and they're against their tribe. They're actually like, they make a moral value out of being against their own tribe. And so that's a big, big psychological force. And it's something that seems to be getting exploited an awful lot by these people, very cynically, which is, again, it's just such an eye-opener then to the whole dialectic of politics is such a waste of time because so much of it is literal low-level slop. And unless you come into it with this attempt to see the meta narrative, what's going on, like you getting caught up in these things is like very stupid.
All right. I know you got to get going. We went over time. I appreciate it. It was very interesting talk. I always love listening to your take on these things. Tell everybody where they can find you for more and any parting words you have for us.
Well, actually, I'll go briefly because I have a little bit more time, but I'm not sure if you want to go, by the way, if you need to go somewhere.
No, go
but I'd love to get into just some ideas on Christianity. So again, with this brain science thing, because it's fresh in my head, I've been thinking a lot about a problem. I've brought up the idea of like, what if Christianity was the woke movement of Rome, as we said. I've brought this up with people before, and that's a mean way to say it because that's not the correct way to say it. But I have often come up against smart people who would say, listen, if we're going to suggest something like Christianity took over Rome and caused these problems, you're going to really need to be able to explain a mechanism is one thing they say. And you need to come up with better historical details. So like two things I think I've landed on might actually deal with this. So number one, I was looking at making an AI film and I was trying to find a good script. And I was actually fascinated to study the last like 15 years of Rome and what they might imply. So, for example, in the 300 AD to 400 AD, so in that century, call it the fourth century, there was this event which is called the Roman boomers. And these were like the last Roman pagans, the last pagan generation who received, kind of like we did, this glorious 800-year-old civilization, and they failed to pass it on to their children. And the reason why that was is that in about 391 AD, Theodosius took power. And Theodosius took power and went on a purge. He went around burning temples. He went on this pagan purge, basically, to get rid of all the pagans. And this was largely driven, we've got all the letters from the time. This was largely driven by these like young male Christian mobs. A lot of them were like young guys, and they would go around. Theodosius mandates that he wants his empire now to mandate Christianity. So first, Christianity got representation through Constantine, but Theodosius was the emperor who he banned paganism. He left only Judaism. That was the only other religion that could be practiced aside from Christianity. So the people of the book and Christianity is the main religion. And everything else was eviscerated, and brutally so. And the temples were all burned and all these type of things. And Theodosius is so interesting because the way he orientates himself is very in-facing. He's like an immune system attacking itself. He attacks the Roman body. He attacks the Roman god, the Roman paganism. And at this time there was like Goths flooding across the border. So it's shockingly similar to our time, where there's this open border problem in Rome, and all these Goths are flooding in. They're like, cartels or something like this, in these gangs pouring into Rome. And Theodosius, this emperor, doesn't seem to be interested in stopping this, or doesn't seem like he has the will or the focus, but he does have this desire to do this religious ideological purification. So this goes on for a while. Then his son Honorius comes, and Honorius is a crazy character because Honorius is like that personality even more extreme. He barely participates in governance in a proper way, but he does all sorts of purges. So he had Stichko, I think his name is, or Stilchiko or something like this. He was a general who was really successful at facing off the Goths, because the Goths were beginning to invade at this point. This was like the 410s. And Stichko was like beating them up, and he was Honorius's best general. And Honorius beheaded him. Honorius turned on him. I think it's not clear why, probably for disloyalty or something like this. But basically, this is his best general. He got killed. And that allowed Alaric the Visigoth to come in and essentially lay siege to Rome. And so Alaric comes in. Honorius is up in Ravenna, which is in like North Italy, and he's hanging out with his chickens, and he just basically doesn't fucking care. He doesn't even participate. And the Goths swoop down through Rome, and they're just destroying everything. And they arrive up at Rome, and they're like beating everybody. And they lay siege to Rome. And then Rome is under siege. And at this point, there's a pagan revival takes place. Now get this. This pagan revival takes place into Rome. It says 15 years ago or 17 years ago, we banned paganism, and we're literally on the point of being conquered. So like clearly we've done something wrong. We've offended Jupiter. We've done something wrong. You banned us doing sacrifices, and you burned our temples. We need to go back. We need to go back to paganism. And Pope Innocent at the time actually says, that's a fair point. Pope Innocent says, okay, you have to go, and you have to bring this to the Roman people, though. That's the only thing. And so the pagans, shocked that they even get the chance, present this idea to the Romans, to the people in Rome, and they say, we want to do public sacrifices. Pope Innocent initially says, you can do sacrifices, but only in your house. You can't do them publicly. And the pagans are like, we want to do publicly. And Pope Innocent says, ask the people if they'll be okay with that. And the mob is basically turned around and say, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to let this. The Christians, they've Christianized too much. And the pagans were depressed. And this created this huge political backlash. And what happened is Alaric shows up and says, we'll lift the siege if you pay us 50,000 pounds of silver. And the Senate and everybody, just as this backlash has happened, decides, okay, you know what we're going to do? We'll pay you the silver. And they go and they take the statue of Victory that sits in the Senate, which is a pagan statue, and they melt it down and pay it to Alaric. And then they start to plunder all the pagan statues and the pagan artifacts and melt them down and give them to the Goths as like ransoms, basically to make them go away. So the Goths go away for 2 years. And then Rome is basically falling apart at this point. And then like Alaric basically runs in and just busts open Rome and just takes it over, almost like kind of smoothly and cleanly, this type of thing. And that's the end of Rome. Rome ends 410 with that invasion by Alaric, the second invasion. That is the end of Rome. It never rises again. That is a permanent fall. And out of that, you get all sorts of interesting Christian documents like the City of God, which is a very famous document, which is explaining why Rome fell and explaining how Rome was a materialistic world focused on the riches of this world. And Rome should have allowed its virtues to be washed away so that it could become a city of God, which is a glorious city in the spirit, but not in the real world, things like this. So I find that quite astounding because there's so many interesting little historical nuances. Now, I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that before I go for a little tirade?
No.
We can wrap it up.
No, keep going. I'm enjoying. You're cooking.
Okay, so I see that. I'm thinking I'm going to try and make a movie on that because there's so many nuances into this. It makes you wonder as well, was the belief in Christianity sincere at that point? And Pope Innocent is quite interesting in that he's like quite open to this. I wonder what was going on with the pagans at the time. So I'd like to illustrate that. But another one then I've thought about, I said the problem of the mechanism. Like how do we describe this, what happened here? So I'm talking about this part of the brain because surely this part of the brain has been consistent throughout history. And it looks like that's exactly what was going on at that point. You have this, we call it the woke movement, but it is the sort of shutting down of the threat detection part of the brain. And this almost like death cult that forms, which was what we call wokeism. It seems like that's what was taking place in Rome. You have Honorius, completely ambivalent to the fact that there's Goths, these outsiders pouring in through the borders, but he's going through these ideological purges of believers who are the pagans. They believe in the God, and they're cleansing the God. They're killing God. They're like atheists in a way. And this is actually what the Romans called the Christians at the time. They said to them, they believe in this weird God that doesn't exist. He lives in the other world. They're atheists. And Honorius was spending his time doing these type of purges instead of defending the country. It's almost like as you reach the end stage, the levels of comfort of a civilization, the levels of comfort go up so high that this threat detection center doesn't need to do its job anymore. And so it gets weak. And then these values begin to emerge where you become, atheist, you become anti-God, anti-self-identity, anti-yourself, anti-race tribe, and you approach this sort of religion of openness, which is very much what Christianity was, a universal religion, and you become incapable of like seeing threats in foreigners, and you become this sort of porous, open entity with no immune system. And this is you see all this architecture in Rome. It's so similar to us now. The death of the national God, which for us was Christianity, the death of tradition, maybe you could say, and then the arrival of the open God, and then the openness to the stranger, the openness to the outsider. So I wonder, is this showing us maybe how this all worked, maybe how it all happened, and how this big story went down? So there's some thoughts.
Chat says, return to the amygdala.
Let's get back.
So you said this is one of the AI films you wanted to make? Is it about the fall of Christianity in Rome?
I'm gonna make videos on this, just me talking about the neuroscience and stuff. That little scene, I think, like as an artist, I know it's a little bit LARPy pretentious, but I see these AI tools as being good. I'd like to have a whack at telling an interesting story, and I think that's a fascinating story because ultimately Rome did fall. At the end, paganism was weak. And it makes you wonder why this all happened. And I think I could do a lot of justice if I just paint the picture without coming in and telling people what to think. Because the actual story itself is real. Like there was a statue of victory. The pagans did try to get animal sacrifice again. They failed to do that. The statue of victory was melted. Honorius was so these are all real things, and that's a story I don't hear people ever saying. It's almost like a really good story that I love to sort of try paint a picture with. So I might try with an AI film. It might be too much work. I'm not sure if it'll look good either as well. It could look kind of trashy, but I'm playing around with a script at the moment, and I'd like to have a whack at like a lot of different stories and just different things. But I just really like that. It's a really neat part of history that has so many things happening. In 2 years, you just have these enormous questions all fulfilled.
Have you heard of The Darkening Age? It's a book that covers the kind of end of paganism in Rome. Yeah, like so. This is my only gripe here would be that she's a little bit biased towards sort of saying that she's a little bit like liberal in her orientation, which I don't want to just dismiss outright. But she puts it down at things like the ignorance, the
it's like Christianity is a ideology coming in creating ignorance, which I understand maybe to a point, but I look at this and I think this is actually much more timely to our situation where we're actually seeing these mechanisms play out in our lives that make an awful lot more sense to me. So I'd say that's what I'd like to. That's the picture I'd like to paint. I look, her book is good. It's well researched. And the Final Pagan Generation is another book, or The Last Pagans is the one you could look at, which is also illustrates a lot of this too.
Is that her book, The Last Pagans?
I'll check who it is. Final Pagan. Edward J. Watts. I tried to get him on the channel before, but he's hard to talk to.
Was that like a Viking king, right? Isn't there a story about the final pagan was a Viking king? Is that
in Rome?
Okay, so not
no. This is about Rome. The final pagan.
Oh, the final pagan in Rome. Got it.
Yeah, in the year 300, in the 300s, which is like you can think of that like the 20th century, the last 100 years. The boomers have received Western civilization, which is like the wealthiest civilization to ever exist. And by the time the boomers die in 2030, so 100 years later, Western civilization it's like America will be essentially like half replaced in terms of population demographics. They've lost the majority of the world. When you just look at it, it's like, how did they fuck that up so much? But this is the thing, is that happened in Rome the same. In the year 300, the pagans ruled the most powerful empire to ever exist with absolute authority. And by 410, they were getting invaded by the barbarians of the north, and their own empire had banned their own religion. It's crazy to think about it, you know? And so it's like the boomer question actually happened in Rome too.
Zionist Cuck sent $5 on Rumble. I played poker in Monaghan last night and asked people about this forced migration issue in Ireland. The answers I got from most of them was we're all the same race, the human race.
Zionist Cuck lives in Ireland, I think. And Archie again.
Sent $14. I feel that too many people are resting instead of pushing harder since Trump won. If Kamala won, then the dissident right would be more motivated. In Ireland, are K-12 schools woke and eliminating Irish heritage? Will a kid wearing a shamrock be expelled?
Good question. Aiden. He doesn't worship a made-up Jew god. Uberboyo is green-pilled, guys. He just likes looking at churches, apparently.
$5 on Rumble. I played poker in Monaghan last night and asked people about this forced migration issue in
All right.
Do people get banned for wearing shamrocks and stuff? I don't see that. I like there's a lot of liberals in Ireland. Absolutely, there's a lot of very strong woke energy inside of Ireland. But I do notice there's a big shift taking place where the population is.
Whistler
like a lot of people are asking questions.
$10 scientific explanation. Jews are a brain structure evolving over humanity. The media and religion are control signal coming from the brain. That's why they are always on left and right.
Thank you. All right, Uberboyo. Guys, everybody follow him on YouTube. Stay tuned for some of those AI. That's where you're going to post them, is on YouTube, right? Some of your new projects you've been working on?
Yeah, the AI stuff will probably be a couple of months away. I'm not sure, but I'll post more like just talking stuff up there recently. And I'm actually not sure where to post the AI. Maybe on Uberboyo. We'll see.
When I'm done with my Jesus Deception book, I think we could do a banger video if you want to.
Oh wow!
If you want to talk about that,
we should have got into that because I could have banged on about that as well. Yeah, like I've got stuff on Gnosticism I want to get into too. Yeah. That's interesting. When's that gonna be done?
John Wright has sent $20 a question for Uberboyo. What is the best Irish beer and whiskey?
Controversial question.
Yeah.
Is there still a big beer pub culture in Ireland?
Oh yeah. People drink a lot still. Like we're drinking less. They're starting to drink like non-alcoholic beer. An awful lot more people are drinking less as a consequence. Irish culture's changing fast, man. You know, but people still drink a fair bit. I'd be back here and people are drinking.
Trev Giz
$5 on Rumble. Hey dude, yo Uber, why is there no Celtic pagan revival like we see from the Norse?
Yeah, where's the Celtic movements in the Irishman?
It's great. It's a great question. It's a really, really great question. Like, it is very fascinating because the Irish myths are probably the richest in Europe, beside the North and beside the Greeks and the Romans. Like the French, for example, got their myths just eviscerated. So we have a very sophisticated and strong and deep mythology, and it's weird because Irish Christianity synthesized with Celtic myths a lot. So when I talk to nationalists, they could be like full Catholics and they will love the Irish myths and they'll talk about them all the time because the Irish myths were documented largely by monks. So there's like spins on them that make them very Christian and on all these type of things. And it's interesting because like I meet people in that and they just treat them as like various things. But I've been pushing this. I pushed a lot of it last year where I was pointing out that like the Irish myths contain in them the racial ethno map of Ireland in an astounding way. So, for example, these monks got control of the Ireland, obviously, and they began to reinterpret the Irish myths to fit them with the Bible. So they said that we all come from a couple of races. So the Irish myths say that we came from Milesians. We came from people called the Tuatha De Danann, who are like the elves in Lord of the Rings. The Milesians are like the men in Lord of the Rings. And then you have like the orcs, who are like the Fomorians. And these are like three races that were in Ireland. And you read the Irish myths, and this is the story, is that the Fomorians, the orcs, lived in Ireland. And they had this guy who was like Sauron, called Balor of the Evil Eye. It's actually where Tolkien got the idea of Sauron's evil eye from. It's called Balor. He lived in a giant tower, and he had a giant eye that destroyed everything. And these myths say that these Fomorians lived there, ruled by this guy. And then the elf people, Tuatha De Danann, the blonde Ubermensch, they came in, and then they fought against them. And then the men came in afterwards. So there's like three races going on here. And this is all like, people read this stuff and they're like, this is insane. What the fuck does this even mean? Like, this doesn't make sense. And then the Irish monks took this and created a lineage back to Noah. So they kind of made an artificial lineage back to Noah to explain this, saying that like, oh, each race came from a different son of Noah and things like this, and created this sort of, and so we're all Israelites, really, is what it is, because this is how it was done. And we looked at the science, Survive the Jive, and characters like this. I've been looking at the genetic science that has only come out in the last 15 years. We're kind of going through a revolution right now. And what did we fucking discover? This is astounding. We discovered that Ireland was originally populated by a group of hunter-gatherers. And then these hunter-gatherers got wiped out by these Neolithic people who were short in stature because they ate the first ever agricultural grain diets. And these Neolithic people worshipped people who looked like these hunter-gatherers, who and did these like inbreeding projects and were like tall and, you know, mangly and all this. And we've actually discovered this, that we have in our old Neolithic gravestones these like giant, weird, inbred god kings of Ireland and stuff like this. And these Neolithic people worship them. And they were sort of like these orcs following a Sauron-like figure, it seems. So that's the first thing we discover. Then we discover the Indo-European theory is correct. And these Indo-Europeans, these bell beakers, arrived in Ireland, and they had this huge fight against these Fomorians, these orcs. So these Indo-Europeans come from the continent, come from Austria and Europe, clash into Ireland, beat out the Fomorians, showing us that the Irish myths are actually telling the truth, that the Irish myths are correct memory of prehistory, a significantly accurate memory of prehistory, one of the best in Europe, actually. And so these bell beakers, these Indo-Europeans, people call them the Aryans, they come in, they fight away the Fomorians, and then later the Celts come. So actually we're not fully Celtic. We're not as Celtic as we thought. We're actually these older guys. And then these Milesians, these men, the later people from Europe come in, and that forms the basis of Ireland. And that's been our demographic since about 4,000 years. That's as old as the pyramids, that story. That's like actually older than the pyramids. And I see all this stuff and I'm like, this is incredible. We should be like talking about this all the time and everywhere. This is crazy. This is like justification that our ancient pagan religion was an accurate memory. And I think there's so much fertility there. I think it's one of the best in Europe for this. Like the Norse myth doesn't really have this. Greek myth doesn't really have this. Maybe you could say the Titans and the Olympians are an example of this, but it's nowhere near as sophisticated as what we have. Ours literally matches the science. But it just doesn't seem.
That's really cool. We need a video on that, breaking down all of that. That sounds really awesome. Oh, you do? Which one is that?
Videos on YouTube, yeah. Yeah, on Irish history. Maybe I need a tighter one, though. I should maybe do a sharper one. I'll do a film on that. That was a plan. I wanted to do a film on that. The Irish Survive the Jive talks about it. If you go before Possessed by Wodan, go down a bit more. Go down a bit more. The Supermen Who Conquered Ireland. Who are the Irish people?
The history of Ireland.
Yeah.
Cool.
You could do those. Yeah. But like maybe see, this is the AI thing, is that when I do this, I rant. So I sit there and I rant and I rant and I rant. And that's kind of like they're hour-long videos and stuff. And it's a nice way to digest information. It's podcast style. The reason why I like AI is because maybe I could sit down and try to get things out in like 20 minutes, 40 minutes. And the information density may be much higher, and I'd be able to do visuals. Because me just talking is like, you know, a different thing. Because that stuff is there, but it's just very rarely explored. So imagine telling that story. You know, imagine articulating that story with
dude, it's shocking to me that you've built up this cool channel, 120,000 subs, and you haven't posted a video in 7 months.
Yeah, I'm so bad.
That is wild to me.
I'm coming.
You need to get back on the horse, dude.
Yeah, true. I'll probably get punished for it as well. I'll probably have no views for a while as I'm trying to get back going. So we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody go follow Uberboyo on YouTube and on Twitter. And thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on. Interesting talk as always. And we'll be in touch.
Beautiful, man. Thank you very much for everything, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody, for supporting, donating. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And I will see you guys tomorrow with another show. Everybody take care.
Bye-bye.